Sana. I'm not a speech giver, but I was inspired to come here today by these sisters who stand in solidarity. So it is in the spirit of solidarity that I'm here with the Muslims, Christians, and Dalit Bahujans of India who are bearing the brunt of Hindutva violence. As a Christian from Kerala, southern India, the violence against Christians across India and most recently in Manipur left me shocked and terrified. The systematic ways in which Sangh Parivar prepares for genocide by using state machinery was in full display. It was hard to put words into the grief of seeing Christian persecution. It broke our hearts. And when Sana got in touch with me about this, coming to DC, she said, and we were talking about Manipur, and she said, communities should not be left to grieve in isolation. And I thought that was very important, that, we should not be alone while we are grieving. It's not just about, individual grief. Just like that, communities cannot be alone. This is not only about the aftermath of pogroms and riots, but also about the everyday indignities and violence that marginalized and racialized communities suffer in isolation. So we have to stop that loneliness and isolation of communities. And it's almost always in an international context that, the violence of the Indian state comes, and often in an imperial center like Washington, D.C., that one is made aware of the vacuousness of considering this collection of nations, the prison house of nations that India is. To consider it as a nation is vacuous if all we have is a collection of racialized and marginalized communities. And I also want to remind you that Hindutva is as much a movement as any other people's movement. It is a movement for hegemony that has been 100 years in the making. And in its most pristine and ideal form, it is a desire for Brahminic utopia that wants to annihilate Muslims, Christians, and communists. But in its concrete form, in its actual everyday form, it's a messy, multi-class, multi-caste coalition that is constantly looking to make inroads into politics and everyday life. It is a movement that thrives on appropriation, that wants to change our society, that wants to change our polity, and that wants to change our state. Manipur is an example where Hindutva has embedded itself into pre-existing ethnic and community fault lines, creating genocidal, anti-Christian and Muslim canards. For example, in Manipur, it's the lies that are being spread about tribals, about poppy cultivation, about drug trade. These anti-minority canards are an important part of Hindutva. And I also want to remind you that the meaning of being radical is being rapidly redrawn and is completely subservient to the vagaries of Hindutva. So this is an important thing to note. It's no more the same, to be a radical in the 60s or 70s in India was a different thing, and to be a radical right now in India is completely, dependent on Hindutva. But at the same time, we have to remind ourselves of the victories that people have, come up with. For example, farmer struggle and anti-NRC struggle were two massive retreats that Hindutva had to beat. It had to freeze the implementation of CAA and NRC and had to unconditionally withdraw the neoliberal farm laws. And most recently, the Karnataka elections have shown that victories are possible. Yet we see how minority-led organizations are being repressed. For example, the recent ban of the Popular Front of India. All of this shows that the repressive apparatus that is selectively being used against minority-led organizations. We also have to take note of the quiet destruction of India's constitutional federalism. This is something that we don't hear much outside India, which is how the federal system of India is being destroyed, how the autonomy of states, how the autonomy of regions are being attacked. And we know that states are repositories of Dalit Bahujan power, minority-led power, and BJP is determined to erode that power. It attacked Kashmir's right to autonomy 3 years back, and now it has turned to other parts of India. Now it is the turn of southern states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, which hold power, to be subjugated by the rule of Delhi. New taxation rules have been introduced to transfer resources from southern states to the Hindu empire. So we see that it never stops with minorities. It always extends to other people and other parts and other regions. And I also wondered, why is there so little coverage of Manipur in mainstream media, both in India and outside India? For example, I was reading a New York Times article, and it failed to mention that it is mostly Christians who are being persecuted and that it is churches that are being burned. So why is it that Christian persecution in India so invisible? The hatred that Hindu upper caste has for Indian Christians is multifaceted. But primarily, just like their fear of Islam, it is about the destabilization of caste supremacy and the enormous potential Islam and Christianity hold to annihilate caste that scares Savarna upper caste. So all of this leads us to the question, how can we be anti-fascist without being anti-caste? So I feel that we cannot just say, I stand in solidarity with Muslims and Christians, but we have to also have a strategy to counter caste hegemony, counter Savarna hegemony. And this is an important moment for Christians to realize that, what it means to be a Christian in India.